Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another New York Live. It's a big week, man. It's such a big week in the space of cryptocurrency. It's an even bigger week in the actual financial markets. Boy, we have got what would look like a red folder week. Now, if you know what I'm talking about, if you go to Forex Factory, you will see there's lots of news that is going to be coming out. Lots of US economic data that's going to be shaping the future of the United States interest rate policy. Whew. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Traders Reality. My name is Tino, and today we're going to be talking quite a bit. Is that anything new? Clearly not. I chew your ears off all the time, and firstly, I want to thank you all for passing through to the live streams every single day. When I press go live, sometimes I press record and start talking to you all thinking that you're all live, but I end up finding out that that's not the case. It has happened before, and it could happen again. But what we're talking about today, well, first things first, it's a very big week for the financial world. FOMC, baby. So if you are new to this live stream, make sure that you are subscribing and hitting the notification bell, because we will be live for the FOMC press conference, which will be aired on the 31st of July, which is not too far away. Wednesday, ladies and gents. Thursday is the FOMC live. Let me just make sure that I've got that correct, just to make sure. No, Wednesday, the 31st of July. Okay, and that will be at 7 p.m. UK time. So I will be going live before that. So just make sure that you guys are around for it, because it is the largest live that we do on the Traders Reality channel. And we're going to get into knowing whether or not the Fed is going to cut the interest rates. Now, investors across the board are already pricing that in. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to cover some aspects of the financial markets. We're going to look at the NASDAQ, the S&P, and the bonds market to understand where's the big money going. Okay, then we're going to be talking about this massive, ludicrous, but it's not ludicrous, but I mean, come on, $13 million Bitcoin. Wow. Micheal Saylor's coming out with the wildest price projections, but it is a little bit far away, and what we want to know is what it's going to do now. So you can only expect that to be the same thing with Micheal Saylor. He's always going to be backing Bitcoin to be going up and up and up. But it's going to be very interesting when you hear the justification for it and what it's in comparison to. It is pretty scary when you think about it. Once we've done with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dive into some Bitcoin price action. So if you're here for the trading aspect of it all and you want to know what levels Bitcoin's going to be taking, make sure you stick around, because as we get closer towards the open of the market, I'm going to be highlighting a few levels that I think you guys need to be very mindful of, which is going to dictate if Bitcoin is going to continue to the upside, or are the bids going to try and buy up a little bit more Bitcoin. Okay? So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, mad love for everyone passing through. I see you, Iron. Boy, great Uncle Tino, can you have a look at the 1 hour Bitcoin chart and say whether it's a level 2 retrace M formation that's taking place right now with the W formation below the 50 EMA? I got you, my friend. Don't worry about it. So, we'll be diving into Bitcoin straight after we cover what's going on in the marketplace. All right? So, let's get with the program, gang. Mad love for everyone passing through. Let's have a conversation. All right, then. So stocks gain ahead of a big week for the central banks. The trifecta of banks. That means the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, and the United States, the Federal Reserve. They're all joining forces today, or not sorry, today, but this week, to have a conversation about their fiscal policies and what they're going to do. This is a massive time in the marketplace. We also have, or we must pay attention to the fact that we do have a new monthly candle coming into play. So we've got to be very careful with our trading when we do actually start talking about it towards the end of this live. I'm going to be highlighting some levels that you really need to be paying attention to. But this is what the focus is this week. Going into the article itself, it's talking about what's going on in the Eurozone itself. Euro's taking a little bit of a shoe bag to the downside. You've got the yields that are declining, which is good news, because when the yields are declining, Bitcoin's moving. When the yields are declining, it means that stocks in principle should be going up. But this week, it's a mad week for the earnings. Look, man, we've got McDonald's coming into play at the open, which are going to be declaring their earnings. Going into Tuesday, we've got Microsoft and Procter & Gamble, all these old household names in the stock market that are going to be declaring their earnings, and they do have relatively decent market caps. Going into Wednesday, we have Meta. Meta's going to be putting out the earnings announcements, which is going to be fueling NASDAQ and S&P's movement either to the upside or to the downside. Now, listen, these tech stocks, they have a big bar to hold up to. They need to be showing that this AI is not a FUD story and it's nothing like a bubble that's going to burst. I mean, if we're going to talk about bubbles and bursting, check this out. Look at this. Mad love to Father Woody and the Maverick of Wall Street putting this out. But check this. This is the sales of Mr. Jensen. Who happens to be him? NVIDIA CEO. Look what this guy's doing. On the 17th of July, this guy, or 28th of June, selling. 5th of July, selling. 5th of July again, selling. The 9th, the 11th, the 15th, the 17th, the 19th, the 23rd, the 25th. He is getting rid of NVIDIA stock. I don't blame him. 14 million, 14 million, 14 million, 14 million, just off the top shelf here. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, these 5 sales, he's live. He has no reason to work. I'm not even going to bother talking about this segment or this segment right here. I mean, the top part could be for his missus. The bottom part could be for him. And then this one right here could just be for a nephew or something. But he's getting rid of NVIDIA stock. Now, what he's planning on doing with it, we don't know. Okay? But that's probably what has led NASDAQ to make a big drop to the downside. Don't worry, Bitcoin, he's going to be all right. Bitcoin won't move just yet. But you can see NVIDIA, given that it is such a large market cap, it does have an impact on the stock market overall, all right? Now, speaking of market caps and the impact itself, look at what we've got going into this week, ladies and gentlemen. It is an absolute madness. We start it off with tomorrow with the German preliminary CPI data. Now, Eurozone itself is a little bit reluctant on the grounds that it cut its interest rates. So it's a little bit concerned if they do see that preliminary inflation comes in higher than what it is, okay? They're projecting 0.3%. We then go into the week with the consumer confidence, the JOLTS job openings. Then we've got the Bank of Japan coming out, and they're suggesting that they might actually increase their interest rates just to get the party started, but it's a problem for them because Powell is speaking the day after. And they really want to know what Powell is going to be doing. Is the US going to cut the interest rates? Now, swap traders are suggesting that they are going to cut the interest rates, but what's the frequency? How aggressive are they going to cut the rates? And that's going to be helping us understand what the bonds market is going to do, because right now, the bonds markets are climbing up. So this is very important for anybody that's investing in the stock market. You're looking for the correlation between bonds going up and the stock market going up. We go over to the NASDAQ itself, and you can see that NASDAQ is sort of doing all right. It's pulling back ever so slightly, but we got some very important levels for the NASDAQ that we need to pay attention to. And this week, NASDAQ is going to be very, very volatile, okay? So if we see the bonds going up and the stock market going up, it means that investors are taking on low risk and high risk. Okay, now going over some of the data regarding the stock market on Friday, you can see that your exposure should be around 40 to 60% of your capital. That's what this reading is right here. But we can see that there's 3 distribution days on the NASDAQ and 6 on the S&P. Now, we've got lots of stocks that are up on volume, but down on volume, 98 stocks. But we don't have that many stocks breaking out. We really need to see a lot of stocks breaking out. And I do believe that this week, if we do get good data from Meta, not to forget that on Thursday, we have Apple and Amazon, the big market caps declaring their earnings announcements. That's going to be the deciding factor if money is going to be going into the markets, which in principle will lead money to go into Bitcoin. Now, with that being said, the week's not done yet. I'm only speaking about Wednesday. Look what's going on Thursday. You have the Bank of England's monetary policy report coming out. Then you've got the unemployment claims, the manufacturing segments coming out as well. And going into the data on the manufacturing PMI, you can see right here that there is a little bit of a contraction in the manufacturing sector. And the issue that the Fed has is they don't want to be cutting the interest rates too soon if the US economy is doing well. Because if the economy can sustain high interest rates, then they have no reason to cut the rates. But if they do see that the economy is starting to contract, and that could be in the reading from the manufacturing PMI and the prices itself, then they might actually say, you know what, we're probably not going to cut the interest rates anytime soon. But the word on the street is that they are going to cut, but it's how aggressively they are going to cut. And then finally on the Friday, we have the good old non-farm payrolls, which historically it's all over the place. If you look at the data itself right here, there's clearly consistency. Every time they project it to be bad, it comes out good. Okay, so if the jobs market does show strength, then the Powell's going to be thinking, well, inflation does have an opportunity to get even worse, okay? So we've got to be paying very close attention to our trading days, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute madness across the board. So just be very careful when you are trading during news announcements. Now, let's get with the program. Bitcoin. So the idea is 10x research suggests that Bitcoin could be subject to lots of volatility. Looking at Bitcoin's price action, you can see it's actually starting to make a significant move to the upside. Just have a quick look. I'm looking on EXO Charts and we can see we're at the 69,906 and we're looking for that 70K breach to the upside. And I do believe that if Bitcoin is going to clear out the 70K zone, then that's going to be triggering a lot of interest in people to come in and start buying the Bitcoin. And I'm going to be breaking down the story of the bids and the offers. That means how many people are buying and how many people are selling to help us understand where Bitcoin is likely to go from this morning's open, which will be in the next 20 minutes. But 10x research is suggesting that there are macroeconomic factors that could impact Bitcoin's price action. Well, I'm not going to talk about the conference just yet because that's the main story here, okay? We need to understand what's going on there and then, well, not the main story, but Saylor's the main story, but the bigger picture of where I'm going with this conversation right now is going to help you understand how likely Bitcoin is going to sustain this rally to the upside, okay? So we know what the week's got in terms of data coming out, okay? And it's all about the Fed's interest rates. That's all it is, ladies and gentlemen. And again, back into the calendar. Whatever Bank of Japan does, if the Bank of Japan decides to not do anything, the dollar's going to keep going up. Bitcoin's going to have a little bit of a problem climbing higher. But Bitcoin right now is not moving because of macro data, in my opinion. You can look at the dollar. The dollar is pumping up, yet Bitcoin is pumping up, okay? So everyone's asking the question, hold on a second, how can Bitcoin be moving up and how can the dollar be moving up? What's going on, in my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, is investors are starting to move money around. They're having to sell dollars, they're having to buy dollars. I mean, if we actually go over to the Aussie yen itself, where the carry trade principle comes into play, you can see that Aussie yen is behaving exactly the same way as the NASDAQ would be, which means that the carry trade principle has yet to be engaged, which in principle means that they will borrow dollars or yen, and then they will take those and then convert them into Aussie, where Aussie as a higher yielding asset will allow them flexibility to go and buy stocks, Forex, commodities, Bitcoin. That's something that will happen. And we see Aussie yen moving up, then that means the stock market in principle should be following suit. But we got a little bit of a green vector candle down here on Aussie dollar, Aussie yen. So that could be a little bit of a problem for me moving forward. Okay. Now, with that being said, just quickly going over into some more articles itself, and I just want to address this with you all, and I want your point of view on it. So the conference come into play, and Donald Trump has decided to turn around and say, never sell your Bitcoin, okay? So we can see that. And he looks like he wants to get rid of Gary the Egg. All right, happy days. Well, imagine who he puts in place. It's going to have to be someone not biased. I mean, you can't really put someone who is pro-crypto because it would kind of defeat the object of the SEC. The SEC can't really be seen as taking sides. It has to be neutral in its approach. But with the conference itself, I didn't see the real volatility of Bitcoin because I believe that they're all waiting for what's going on this week in terms of data. But there's something that's going off here. You've got Trump that's trying to get people's interest with regards to cryptocurrency. Now, some statistics say that I believe it's 60% only, I think it's 40% of Americans, okay, are involved in cryptocurrency. And by next year, it's going to be around 60% of people. So that's roughly around 90 million people are involved in cryptocurrency right now in the United States, okay? That's a lot of votes. That's why Kamala is starting to reignite relationships with previous crypto firms that have kind of been pushed behind the scenes. And this is what you've got going off, ladies and gentlemen. In principle, they're using cryptocurrency, in my opinion. And what's your point of view? Depends, whoever wins, Kamala or Trump, doesn't matter. The fundamental thing is cryptocurrency is getting exposure right now. And I'm going to make life easier for these crypto firms that may have had life hard in the past. Mr. Trump's turning around saying, don't sell your Bitcoin, hold on to it, we want to make it a strategic reserve coin, happy days. The only thing that can result from this is people's speculation that Bitcoin is going to keep on going to the upside. You've got two presidents in principle talking about crypto. Since when has a presidential run been about cryptocurrency? Because that's what it is. And I think that is the best form of exposure for crypto. So if you're going to exploit that, then ladies and gentlemen, make sure you're taking money off the table and pay yourselves. Okay? Now let's just get to this story right here. $13 million forecast for Bitcoin in 2025. Do you understand what that means? it means that Bitcoin's market cap will be $270 trillion. That's 7% of the global wealth. I mean, the only thing that's working in favor of Bitcoin is the supply. That's it. That's all that's going in its favor. Now all we need is more people to pick it up. That's the simple truth. $13 million Bitcoin, ladies and gentlemen. Do you understand what that means? $270 trillion market cap. It sounds crazy, but it's coming from a Bitcoin maximalist who holds around 300,000 Bitcoin, but doesn't look like he's going to be slowing it down anytime soon. They're already trying to offer convertibles. They're already looking at a stock split. So MicroStrategy is trying its hardest to make sure that it gets as much capital as it can and leverage itself to buy Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is prone to seasonal behavior. Look at this. In front of you is Bitcoin seasonality. And what it says is, when do you expect Bitcoin to be moving? Okay, so going down here, you can see that going from January, February, all the way through the year, you can see that we have some decent time around April, May, and June. July, August, September doesn't really look like it's a decent time. Then everyone's getting ready for Christmas, and then everyone's getting all pumped, and then you've got the October pump, happy days. Everyone's in the mood for spending money. You expect Bitcoin to pull some flavor, okay? Historically, we assume that August and September time is when investment funds are actually getting getting ready for holidays and what have you. So trading tends to slow down a little bit, but fundamentally Bitcoin will keep on moving, which is what it's not really doing right now, okay? But this is something to take into consideration, all right? So if you are going to get busy trading, just remember that August, September time usually is a little bit of a quiet time in the marketplace. Now, where are we in terms of retail traders in speculation? In front of you is the Bitcoin optimism chart, all right? So what this says is, pretty simply, when it's above 80, it's excessive optimism. When it's below 20, it's excessive pessimism. Look at where we are right now, okay? When we approach this red line, it would suggest that we are at a state of massive optimism, okay? And historically, you can see that every time it comes to this point, it usually corrects from it. But what you've got to be mindful of, this is over the last 6 months. How many states of optimism have we had over pessimism? And it's clear as day that you can see that we've had more pessimism about Bitcoin than we've had optimism. Now, pessimism would be where smart money is doing the buying, in principle of the bids and the offers. Zoom out. What are you seeing more of? Now, we're seeing that there are some bids coming into play, but we've got a high concentration of offers that are coming in where they do want to sell the Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is very close towards the whole and half number principle, which is the 70K region, which they've just tapped and they've rejected it. Okay? What we've got to pay attention to is, if Bitcoin is just going to continue up, regardless of the macro data, how are you going to prepare yourself for a potential earner on Bitcoin? Well, first things first, you've got to go over to the daily time frame to understand where you are. Now, Bitcoin has done a fantastic job of clearing out what would look like the rise, the retrace, the continuation to the upside, okay? Now, if you've been watching the live streams for some time, you'll know that over the last couple of weeks or so, we've been expecting Bitcoin to try and make the move to the upside, okay? And the holders, where I made the reference to this specific range right here, as if it can break that point, then Bitcoin is going to make a nice move to the upside. Well, that has now come through and you've managed to get yourself the rise, now the retrace, and then the continuation up. The next logical spot for Bitcoin for the holders will be this point right here, which sits around the red vector candle region, okay? And we're not too far away from it. How do we justify that? Well, look at this. All these guys that are running shorts right now on Bitcoin, okay? They are probably going to be tested. All right, so you're going to have to be careful if you are running shorts on Bitcoin. And a lot of short sellers are probably going to be adding margins to their positions, which is naturally going to be increasing the value up here for the market maker. Because market maker, he likes to build his positions and then he releases them to the upside. He's now preparing price for a rally to the upside to effectively clear out the infamous and the most anticipated thing in cryptocurrency, the all-time high. Okay? So when we look at it from that perspective, holders are about to experience, if Bitcoin can do this, once it clears this high, then there is potentially the promise that our projection of 80 to 85K Bitcoin is more than likely going to come through. Now, this week, the volatility that's going to be happening with all this news announcements, I will be bloody surprised if Bitcoin doesn't hit and clear above the all-time high. If it doesn't clear it, ladies and gentlemen, if they don't clear the all-time high once the press conference comes into play, all right? Because I've said September, okay? But with this week's data, there is the potential for Bitcoin to really take a shoe bag to the downside to prepare them for buying more Bitcoin. And then when we get the rate cut, Bitcoin then makes the move. But too much is being discussed about Bitcoin for it to not go up. You even go into the actual Arkham. Where is Arkham? Where's my Arkham thing? Here we go. With the ETF. Let me just go back into it. Oops, go to my dashboards. Hold on a second. Click my dashboard. Here we go. $3.6 billion in July has been going into the ETFs itself. BlackRock's ETF value has gone up to $23 billion itself. Grayscale's still doing its thing. Going down, looking at the transactions for the ETF itself, we're not really seeing that much activity. It's pretty light across the board, so I'm not really too concerned about it. But if we just quickly go over to Bitcoin's ETF itself, you can see that iBIT over here, we've got a potential breakout, which could then suggest that we're going to see this vector candle recovery point in the ETF. Now, some people are asking about the CME gap. All right, let me explain something about the CME gap. You always, and the same with the vector candles, okay? You've always got to say to yourself, yeah, but Tino, what about the gap, the gap, the gap? Forget the gap. Price is moving up right now. My job isn't to worry about what it could do in the future, like the real long future away. Like, for example, you got Micheal Saylor talking about a $13 million Bitcoin in 2045. What are you going to do? Wait till 2045 before you decide to buy Bitcoin? Logic would say that you're going to try and buy some now in hope that you hold it until 2045 and you realize a $13 million Bitcoin. Happy days. But the time scale's way too far ahead in the future. So many things can change. So it's not really something that this is good to talk about. You know, what's your price projection, bro? I'm convinced that I actually saw it was $49 million. That's what he was talking about. I thought it was $49 million, but apparently it's now $13 million. Okay? But what you've got to remember, guys, is, and for the guys talking about the CME gap, fundamentally, they will come back to this gap. There will be a time they come back to it. But let's just go back to the vector candle that happened in February, back in the day before Bitcoin made the move to the upside to its first all-time high, the Elon Musk trade, okay? It took Bitcoin the best part of around maybe 6-7 months before it came back into it. But it had moved away so aggressively that there's no real point in focusing on the CME gap just yet. Because what we don't know is the pressure of all the buying that's been happening here, how much is that release going to lead Bitcoin higher up for? We don't know what the concentration of positions are in this area, which means that when we look at Bitcoin on the order flow, which is the bid and the offer chart, the idea is that you've got guys up here that want to sell their Bitcoin. So for anyone that wants to know, I'm going to give you some statistics here, and you can mark it off as levels on your chart. Check this out. The highest order, or the biggest order in the visible range for Bitcoin sits at 72,100. And that is an order to sell Bitcoin for 31,260,000. An order up there. Initial count is 433 Bitcoin will be sold at 72,100. You then have another order at 73,889, which is for 7 million. Now, back in the day, I said that Bitcoin will clear the 73K region and then make a correction down. That happened. Now I'm coming into the same story where this is what I believe Bitcoin is likely to do based on my experience of the marketplace. Now, Bitcoin, when you're seeing price playing below whole and half number principles, what I mean by that is you've got the 70,000, and this is an exercise for anyone that is new. Anyone that is new to the hybrid system, first things first, make your way over to tradersreality.com, okay? And in that website, there is a course on there. It's free of charge, and it's called Breaking Down the Hybrid System, okay? And what that's going to show you is how to understand the way we use this system, okay? It's only an hour long. You've been here for 24 minutes. You're halfway through the course, okay? Go and do that course because it's going to help you understand the logic that I'm going to deliver right now. In sales, you all go into a shop and the money that they want you to spend always is below the whole number. So pay $24.99 for this, pay $555 or, pay $999 for this. You can go to your wife and say, I paid $999 today for this. She'll be like, why'd you pay $1,000? No, I paid $999. Subliminally, it leaves an impression in your mind that you're not paying much because a whole number, $1,000 off, is more impressionable. So the money that they want you to spend is always a little bit lower than the big number. But the money that they don't want you to spend, or the money that they want you to save, is always in big, bold writing. $1,000 off. Yeah, baby. Happy days. The same thing holds true in the stock market and in any asset across the board. Right now, Bitcoin is toying below the 70,000 region. You can see it seems to be finding a resistance at this 70,000 zone. So for anybody new, go and mark off the 70,000 point. Go then mark off the 71,000. Then mark off the 72,000. And what you will find, ladies and gentlemen, what the hell is that? Am I sweating? What you will find, guys, is at those whole and half number points, at those whole and half number points, you will then start to understand how they behave around those regions. So just literally just take a couple of lines and just mark them off and look at how price behaves. And you'll start to get a feel for people's idea of value, the perception of value. And anyone that's trading Forex, by the way, always have in your mind the idea of value, because investors and hedge fund managers will always think about how much more can I buy with this amount of money. So then when we go into the idea of Bitcoin and the dollar dominance, you're seeing dollars going up and Bitcoin's moving up. You're thinking, hold on a second, how's that the case? Well, what's going on is people are putting dollars to work elsewhere and they're taking positions off and then probably going into Bitcoin, because they're now thinking that the dollar could be going up. So I want to make sure I can get as much buying power as I can to effectively feed and buy more Bitcoin. Okay, so that's something that could be possibly happening with Bitcoin right now. But going back to what I said about the 73K zone, what I believe is going to happen is this. Throughout this week, I do believe that we will hit the all-time high again. Okay, and I think we're going to flush through that. Once we flush through that, there will be an aggressive reversal from that point. Because not only will it trigger these guys up here to sell, it will also trigger people who are going to wake up and be like, what price is Bitcoin at today? And they could actually go and sell aggressively. The book itself has got a little bit more liquidity to the top side. 75,000, you can see there's 16 million Bitcoin that is potentially ready to be sold. Going to the top side of that range right there, you have got 13 million at 75,888. So we're not saying that there's no one selling, but what we're saying is there is a potential for more people to step in if they do see Bitcoin making the move to the upside. Now, for my day traders, let's just quickly go over and have a look at what we've got from Bitcoin in terms of the order flow. You can see Bitcoin right now is starting to pull back in towards the point of control, and it's currently sat inside an area of value, which means that at 2.5K contracts at this point, we expect that we're going to be seeing people showing an interest in Bitcoin. Now, look at what they're doing. They're playing this all below the whole number of 70,000. So if you were going to try and sell an item for $70,000, and you were able to go and buy it cheaper than $70,000, you're going to do your best to buy as many items as you can below that $70,000, because you know there's people out there that are prepared to pay $70,000 for this item. So that's what's going on right now inside of this range. They are buying the Bitcoin below the whole number of 70K, and that's consistent with the market maker's policy. He likes to build positions below whole and half number principles. And that means, and also in line with the gentleman's comment about the cycle, where we are in terms of a cycle on Bitcoin is going to help us understand, is it possible that the idea of an 80 to 85K Bitcoin could come into play? So let me answer that question for you. You're talking about it. Let me just quickly go over to the comment itself. Okay. He says, great Uncle Tino, what's good, nephew? Could you take a look at the 1 hour Bitcoin and say whether it's a level 2 rise retrace or an M formation that is taking place right now after the W formation below the 50 EMA? All right, so the gentleman is talking about this play right here. So W formation, 50 EMA. Well, let me explain it to you like this so that we're on the same page as the cycle, okay? Look at this. In front of you, you can see that there is a specific structure coming into play. Now, for anybody new, stick with me on this one. What time is it? 30 minutes. Okay, cool. So the market's going to be open now. This is the cycle that gentleman's talking about. W formation. Rise, retrace, level 1. Rise, retrace, level 2. Rise, retrace, level 3. Peak formation. Drop, level 1. Drop, level 2. Drop, level 3. Peak formation. This is what you would call a cyclical move in Forex, because this is where it comes from. It's from Forex. Some of you might be familiar with it with Elliott waves or Wyckoff distribution methods and what have you, okay? Fundamentally, it's a markup and a markdown phase for the market maker. He builds his shorts. He sells them. He marks price up. He marks it down, okay? So where are we right now? Well, if we just look at Bitcoin, you can say the following. You can say, okay, we've got ourselves fundamentally a W formation, okay? Don't be static with the W formation. It doesn't have to look like a W. It's a representation of behavior. Don't follow the pattern, follow the intention of what it's trying to do. And that is, obviously, it looks like a W. Some of you might say it's a triple bottom. Some of you will say it's an inverted head and shoulders. It just looks like a W, and structurally I look at it and I say, if I can find this same pattern in the past, then I can anticipate that based on a number of confluences coming together, I would assume that when I see that again in the future, there's a good chance Bitcoin's going to try and make a move to the upside. The great thing about this channel is we give you the patterns, but we also give you the understanding behind who is buying and selling, which is the makeup of the pattern itself. We're not just structural traders. We are always going to be considering the vector candles to the left of the chart. We're going to be considering the macros. We're going to be considering where we are, because right now we are in a macro environment. That means we're relying on data. We've got big policy changes. 3 banks are talking this week, ladies and gentlemen. That means as a hedge fund manager, I've got an opportunity to see if I can take advantage of the spread on owning dollars or owning yen or owning pound. And that's going to help me work out whether or not I'm going to put my money in this asset or this asset. And when you have that understanding, you then look at this and say, well, Bitcoin's done the W formation. We've now got what looks like the rise and the retrace level 1. But because this is a small consolidation, I'm going to consider that this area here is the bigger consolidation, because they haven't really broken out of this range and they've come straight back into it. So this, for me, fundamentally would be a level 1 rise from this structure right here. This cycle to the upside is only going to be invalidated if Bitcoin is to break below the 53,282 zone. So as a holder, you've got plenty of space to work with, okay? Now, when you look at this structure right here, you'll then say to yourself, okay, by the policy of your little drawing right here, Tino, if we're in level 1 right here, fundamentally, by the principle of this structure, are we getting ready for a level 2 rise? Yes, we are. That's the fundamental bit, because you can see the consolidation going sideways. So if I'm going to simply take Bitcoin and say, okay, it needs to hold above the 68,471, and if it does go below this point right here, it can. Technically, Bitcoin can still come back down towards this point and the cycle will still be valid. Why? Because the cycle will be invalidated if it breaks below the 53,384, which is why you've got to be patient with the cycles, okay? I'll give you an example. I was waiting for a level 2 breakout on dollar yen. I waited 2 weeks. 2 weeks, man. So cryptocurrency, with the way it moves, that's a walk in the park for you all. What we're looking at here is, if this is level 1, we're expecting level 2, okay? And on a weekly basis, principally, Bitcoin does have the capacity to move 780,350 pips. That's the smallest change in price. Look here, you see where it says 52,524, and then you've got this double digits here, 99. That change is a single pip. So let's just take Bitcoin's weekly range and make the assumption that from this breakout point, which it has broken out from this point, to achieve a weekly move to the upside to the sum of 780,000, that would then put Bitcoin at this high right here. That's 76, okay? We then have a new monthly candle coming into play, okay? So then wherever Bitcoin ends up on the monthly candle, on average, it makes an average of 101,498,829 pips. So in principle, double that move. So we take that, mark it up. In principle, where does that take us? Smack bang to your $85,000 Bitcoin, which is why I'm expecting Bitcoin to hit the 85K heading into the September time. If the logic of the cycle does come into play, we fundamentally expect this. Retrace up level 2, up level 3, move it up a little bit more. And then the cycle, in principle, repeats. That's the logic right there, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Cool. Any questions on that? Is there any questions regarding that? Okay? Tino, when scalping on the 5-minute time frame, does it really matter to watch yields and bonds, especially if the market is going down like NASDAQ last week? Let me tell you something. It's very important to be watching the bonds, and it's very important to be watching NASDAQ. It's very important to be watching NVIDIA as well. And a little tip for you all. When you're scalping the NASDAQ or the S&P, have NVIDIA up and have the bonds market up. Because if you see the stock market moving up and you see the bonds market moving up, there seems to be the happy days auction because they want low risk and they want high risk. When you see NVIDIA moving up and the NASDAQ seems to be consolidating, it means money's going into NASDAQ. So when NVIDIA pumps up, it's $3.5 trillion market cap. You're going to want to pay attention to that bad boy. You see money going into that, NASDAQ logically is going to start moving up as well because investors are all watching NVIDIA. A, because it's cheap, and B, because it's got the biggest market cap in the tech stock industry itself. So it always pays to actually have those assets in front of you watching them, all right? Remember, low bonds, low risk, money going up, high risk, stock market going up. It gets a bit tricky when you see the bonds going down and the NASDAQ and the S&P moving up, okay? Because the yields will then be going up and then the stock market's going up. Tells you what? It tells you that smart money is selling, okay? So when the stock market's going up, smart money is selling into who? Retail, who is buying. Okay? I hope that makes sense, ladies and gentlemen. And just before we finalize, if you are going to start trading, again, our preferred exchange is BTCC. There is a trading competition coming up very, very soon, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to get those details over to you once we know where we are with that. So get yourselves acquainted with BTCC. They've been around for 12 years. 13 years, and you can do 300 plus cryptocurrency futures. But more importantly, as an American, you don't need to worry about KYC or VPN. Just make sure that you are depositing with crypto. You deposit with fiat, they're going to need everything and your nan to make sure that you are who you say you are. Okay? But stick to crypto. No KYC, VPN is required. All right? Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that helps you. That little story about the cycle, it should, in principle, aid you in understanding where we are with Bitcoin. But more importantly, going into this week, it's a big week. So make sure that you are not using too much size. Only risk what you are prepared to lose. And you should always know what you're going to lose before you take the trade. Because if you don't know what you're going to lose, then you might not be able to absorb what will be lost. Never focus on what you can make. That's what gamblers do. Traders think about what they can lose. Have yourselves a wonderful day, ladies and gentlemen, and I will be checking in with you all later tonight. Mad love. Peace.